Back with TSPN, the Supervisor Richard Forster with your Supervisors Report from our June 24th, 2014 meeting. Starting off the meeting today under public comment, we had Rick Hobson in the Amador District Ranger from the Amador unit, and we chastised Mr. Hobson a little bit on this issue because he announced to us that Squaw Ridge, the name will be changed. They're dealing with the Southern Washoe tribe, and the new name is going to be an Indian name that was chosen by the Washoe. They didn't want to name it Washoe Ridge, so it's going to be Hungalelti, Hungalelti Ridge. So it's no longer Squaw Ridge. And he announced that it was basically an executive decision by the administrators within the Forest Service. And, part of what we have, and we told him, we may have not objected to the name change. We're objecting to that we have a process in place. The process is that we consult on things like this, government to government, just as you're consulting with the tribe, government to government. But the county is supposed to be part of that as a governmental agency, and they ignored that process. So the executive order basically that was issued will stand. But we raised our objection, and you know what, it doesn't hurt to do that once in a while, because if they ignore us on something like this, then they'll ignore us on something that is even a bigger issue in the future, and the process is in place. So we listed our objection to the process, not necessarily the name change. A first step on the agenda today, we had the Elections Department in. George Allen, our Deputy Registrar of Voters, was in and gave us the results of the election. The board has to approve the election results after the canvass is done. The canvass showed that only 46.72% of Amador County voters voted this time, which I'm going to chastise our voters a little bit because we're normally up in the 60 to 70% range. And I'd like everyone to get out there and vote. Every election is important. So with that, we did have also the people that were elected, and we had to approve them. I want to announce them because, they put in a lot of time running for election. Jim Rooney, our assessor; Tacey Oneta-Ruin, auditor; Kim Grady, county clerk recorder; Todd Reeby, district attorney; Martin Ryan, sheriff; coroner; Richard Glock, superintendent of schools; Brian Oneto, supervisor, District 5; Michael Ryan, treasurer, tax collector. Write-in candidates, there were 5 votes cast for Patrick D. Hogan for District 5 Assembly, and there were no votes cast for governor. There were 3 people that qualified for write-ins. Karen Bernal, Jamel Walls, and Nicholas Wildstar received no votes, so wouldn't want to be in that case. But anyway, the board did certify that canvass of the voting. We had a great presentation from Chris Bennett with PG&E, the Hydro Generation Division. Chris talked about all the intricacies of the FERC 137 license that was issued, and that's the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. He talked about the overall system on the McCalmy River, all the way from Lower Bear, Upper Bear, Salt Springs, Tiger Creek, the Electra and West Point powerhouses. Really an interesting system. How it got started was by a gentleman named Mr. Andre with a Polish background. Some of the board members thought he might be Italian, but he was actually Polish background. He got the idea to put the dam in to help generate electricity to operate the mines. Well, he quickly found out that you make more money if you operate the electricity and ship it to San Francisco, so he partnered with General Electric and some of the other major companies. Also, they knew that they had to build dams on the river to allow the river to become productive and not just be a puddle, basically, as the Cosumnes is in the summertime. Without those dams, he estimated that the flow on the river would be from 0 to 32 cubic feet per second, which is not very much. But they have to maintain that 7-year cycle. Every 7 years you go into a drought cycle is what they found out, and without those series of dams to actually capture the water, you'll not be able to utilize it for power, for domestic purposes, for anything else, for recreation, for that fact. But the other thing that came up is there are recreational and fish releases on the river from 100 to 700 cubic feet per second. That's a lot of water that we're sending down the river, especially in a time of drought. That 38,000 acre feet per second for water is what is normally goes down the river, I guess, and no water releases on the river would mean that low flow rate of 0 to 32, so not very much water there. And by the way, the size of a basketball is 7.4 gallons, or about the size of a cubic foot per second. So if you're thinking about 30,000, let's see, if we're thinking about 100 to 700 cubic feet per second, let's say 100 cubic feet per second, how many basketballs is that? That's a lot of basketballs that would go over the spillway or down the river. There is an ecological resource committee that's put together because of the FERC license settlement. That committee does allow them to do things like, in terms of drought, they can be relieved of the pulse requirements or pulse flow, where they have to have 5 pulse flow releases per year down the river. This year they were relieved of 2 of those because of the drought. So there's really an interesting system and a lot of facts to that system. And we're going to have Chris Bennett, I know, at another location to speak, because really he's knowledgeable of that system. He loves the upcountry, done a lot of packing and things. And anybody that wants to, he said, come on up, we'll give you a tour. We had the 2013-14 grand jury final report. They spoke on things like the Health and Human Services building for the county and the contractual arrangement that was there. They weren't very complimentary of that agreement or the county for putting that together. Sometimes you take shots that you deserve. So the other things that happened with the grand jury report, they talked about the school system and our school board and bad behavior on the board. Basically, they cited Brown Act violations within the school district and the school board, and just the method of operations that they're taking with the public. It's not very kind to the public. They also looked at special events in the county and, of course, the Mule Creek State Prison, our sheriff's office, the jail, and Pine Grove Camp. We had, on the planning side, we approved by ordinance a resolution that was already discussed, and this was basically to extend the banner allowance because of economic decline in the county. People can utilize banners a little more effectively, but we extended that ordinance, that resolution, for 2 years by ordinance. We had Secure Rural Schools Act talking about the money that is given through our Title I, Title II, and Title III programs to the Fire Safe Council with Kathy Coos-Brazell as the executive director. She is doing a pretty good job putting those plans together. The Upcountry, High Country Community Wildfire Protection Plan, the Fiddletown Community Wildfire Protection Plan, and Firewise activities. She's working diligently to make many communities in our county Firewise communities. You have to actually qualify to be in those, and because of those, some areas may qualify for better insurance rates. So our board is supporting Kathy Coos-Brazell and Fire Safe Council with those projects, and looks like they're coming to fruition, quite a few of them. Not a lot of money, but she's being very effective in going out and applying for grants. We had our jail property assessment, Sheriff Martin Ryan and John Hopkins, our General Services Director, in, and it's a tough nut to crack on this end because there's just not enough money in the pot to build a new jail. We get $22.5 million as a grant from the state. It probably is going to cost us an additional $20 million to build the jail. We don't have that additional $20 million, so we're trying to be creative, going back to the committee on this level, as well as looking for other avenues of funding that may entail giving back our $22.5 million grant. We don't want to end up like Calaveras County. We don't want to end up like Kern County, that are both building jails and they don't know where they're going to get the money to operate that jail, because when you build a new jail, your operating costs of staff, of food, of medical, because your numbers go up, your population go up in the jail, your staffing goes up, so your costs about double. In our case, our costs would go from easily from $2 to $4 million per year. We don't want to end up like other counties that are wondering where we're going to get the money. You think about that before you build a jail, but you also think about the ongoing risk of not building a jail, of not having enough room in your jail. Fortunately, the state's been kind enough to give us those triple bunks that they used at Mule Creek when they were having problems. So now that the state's thrown all of their problems over on the county, at least they're loaning us their triple high beds that we can use. We had a discussion on the City of Ione and mitigation funding coming out of the Mule Creek State Prison infill expansion. The decision was to give the majority of the money to Ione with the provision that Ione would have that money in a designated account that would be singled out in their general fund, so separate from the general fund, so that that money would not be commingled, and it would be used exclusively for a capital project within the City of Ione, or as it turns out, it may be multiple capital projects if their single project that they're looking at will not come to fruition. We had budget that was approved yesterday, and do want to say we had a $600,000 structural deficit that was showing at the start of our budget cycle. It was exacerbated by a couple of things: tobacco securitization funds that were about $180,000 less, special distribution fund gaming money, $260,000 that the state said we no longer have that money. Fortunately, with the budget that was passed, we have extra revenues that have come in from the state to compensate for that and give us a little breathing room. So it looks like we're going to be okay with some programs we've implemented. If you want to see the full board meeting, you can go to our website at www.amadorgov.org. And this Supervisor Richard Forster. We'll talk to you again in a couple weeks.
You're watching Amador County's local television network, TSPN.